So just a quick welcome to everybody. It's the PPP loan forgiveness webinar that we're doing bi-weekly at the moment with Chris Carlsson, who's one of our SCORE mentors, and the PPP aficionado. So just as usual, for those of you who are new, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're going to take Q&A. We'll take it throughout the webinar. Just post your questions in the Q&A function box. Try not to put them in the chat because we may not see them if they're in the chat, and it's easier to manage them when they're in the Q&A. We don't use the raise hand function either, so just post your questions. And we will get, if you think we're not seeing them, we are. I promise you, if they're in the Q&A, we'll just get to them in a little bit. So with that being said, I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to take you through the presentation. Thanks, Chris.
Yes, thank you, and welcome everybody to another edition of our PPP seminar webinar. And not that much new happening, so I thought today I was just going to run through a little primer, a PPP 101, if you will. So we're going to talk about PPP 1, 2, a little bit about forgiveness, and a little bit update on the EIDL. As you know, there's a lot of money out there, some 800 billion almost now in total. And I think the first 600 some billion were not all taken. And the second 284, I think there's like 130 left, which I think is why they are extending it, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. So let's go back and recap what we've been over a couple of things. What is PPP really? And I keep getting some questions about this, especially people who are now coming into it for the first time, which is great. I've had questions from some nonprofits here in the last couple of weeks that are new to it. So what PPP is, it's a forgivable loan by a lender. So which is why all of this is done on a portal, on a lender portal, and it's guaranteed by the SBA till it is forgiven, and then it's paid off by the SBA to the lender. And it's based on the annual payroll costs, typically 2019 payroll costs. And it's put in quotation marks because there is more to it than just payroll, as most of you know. And there are two of them, PPP 1 and PPP 2. And you can get both, and most people are getting both. And it will be forgiven if you apply for forgiveness. And it's in big letters because it won't get it. At this point, it will not be forgiven unless you apply for forgiveness. So what do you get? What's the maximum PPP money you can get? It is 2.5 times average payroll costs, which is the same thing as 20.83% of the annual payroll. However, if you pay anybody, including yourself, over $100,000 on an annualized basis, then that overage doesn't count. So if you have $1 million payroll and you have 2 people that are paid $150,000 each, that overage of 2 times 50 gets taken off, and the payroll is $900,000. You add to that the local state payroll taxes, you add the benefits costs, that's a 401k, employer portion of health insurance costs, and employer portion of group life. That is how it's calculated. Now, for sole proprietors, single member LLCs, it's really based on Schedule C or K1, some cases, but let's stick with the Schedule C. And nowadays, as we show later, I shall show later on here, it is based on the top line on the Schedule C, not the net income, but the top line, maxed at 100K. So the max loan is 20,800 something. And the forgiveness is based on the cost that you have over 8 to 24 weeks, you'll pick. And the basis is the payroll cost, the gross payroll, same things as we talked about before, gross payroll, local state taxes, benefit cost, healthcare cost, group life. And the payroll cost has to be at least 60% of the total forgiven amount, which means that the additional eligible expenses can be up to 40% of the total forgivable amount. And those includes the rent, mortgage interest, utilities, PPE, some operating expenses, property costs, supplier costs, rent, mortgage interest, utilities. Those are things that had to have been in place by 2/15/20 to count. So if you leased a new office space, new warehouse, effective 3/15 last year, it doesn't count. But anything before, on or before that counts. So let's talk about, hold on, first bite. I jumped. So right now, as we speak, unless it passed Senate today, which I haven't seen as of a couple of hours ago, right now we have to get approved by 3/31. Congress pushed that to apply by 5/31 and approved by 6/31, and it's waiting for Senate to pass that legislation. Everybody in the world expects that to happen, including me. It should be a bipartisan no-brainer to push that, and there's money left to be had. So first bite requirement, less than 500 employees. It's based on 2019 payroll, unless you change it by seasonality if you weren't in business all year, etc. But 98% of everybody's 2019 payroll must be in business by 2/15/20. So you need payroll reports mostly for this. As the covered period extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, payroll will be the main thing that supports all this. And payroll cost for getting the first bite, you need bills for the health insurance, the 401k, those kind of things. You have to be able to upload it. But the main thing are get the payroll reports from the payroll company. Second bite, same thing. Right now, 3/31, it has to be approved by, but it is getting extended to 5/31/21 for application approval on 6/30/21. Again, waiting for Senate to enact that legislation. Requirement for the second bite, less than 300 employees, revenue reduction 25% in any quarter 2020 compared to 2019. Most people look at your second quarter, that's where 90% of the businesses took a big hit. And people are asking, well, what about my net profit for the year didn't go down? Doesn't have anything to do with it. My revenues for 2020 didn't go down compared to 2021. Really doesn't have anything to do with it either. It is if it went down in any quarter 2020 compared to 2019. In most cases, that is the second quarter. And when they say revenue reduction, they're expressing it as gross receipts, and that is your financials. If that's QuickBooks, you just run them by quarter, or if you run them by month and try to figure it out. If you are really small and you don't run it really on a financial statement, then it will suffice that you go and get your bank account where your in and outs for the business go, and you show that the ins for the second quarter was at least 25% lower than the ins for the second quarter in 2019. Now, if you do run financials and you are on an accrual basis and you have invoicing in the second quarter that, let's say, you have $30,000, $40,000 that didn't get actually collected until, or never did get collected. Let me rephrase that, never did get collected. And maybe you wrote it off at the end of the year 2020. I would say then go back to the second quarter where it did belong. If that was originating in the second quarter and never get collected, you can then deduct it out of the second quarter revenues. And if you're close, that may kick you over for the 25%. You also have to spend all of the first PPP dollars by the time you get the second, and that's something that you have to say that you have done. You don't have to actually apply for forgiveness to do the second PPP. There is also, as you might remember, a necessity test. And what does that mean? That means that you are saying, you're certifying that you need this money to not have a substantial reduction in operation or not going out of business. And how do you know that? You really don't. What many people have done and what I did was I did a forecast, and many didn't even do a forecast. They did something on kind of just looking at the picture. Where am I? What happens if my revenues go down by 10, 15, 20%? Then I'm in trouble. If that's the case, you want to justify that, write a memo to yourself or your board of directors that is clear what your thought process was at the time. It is not what the end results ends up being. If you do better than what you, the wildest dream, thought you would do, that's irrelevant. What is relevant is what you think of the world as you sit there before you apply for the second bite. And here we get to one of the newer things, and I think we covered it 2 weeks ago too, but it is worth reiterating. For all of you who are sole proprietors and single member LLCs, and you have your business coming into your tax return on Schedule C, then how you apply for the maximum amount on the PPP changed. It went from being 20.83% of net income to 20.83% of revenues at the maximum of $100,000 in revenues. So if you had $200,000 in revenues on your Schedule C, your bottom line that you set on your tax return was $30,000. Then basically your maximum forgivable loan went from about $6,000 to about $21,000. Big difference for small people operating, make a huge difference there. And for people who before felt that it's not worth the hassle for a couple of thousand, well, now it may be 21,000. So it might be worth the hassle. And it may make a big difference in how you conduct business and your well-being and sleeping at night, all those things that we go through. So let's talk a little bit about forgiveness. I know I'm running through it quickly because I do want to go to questions and not hold everybody up, including myself, too long. So forgiveness, what is that really? That is matching expenses against the loan. Because they say that eligible expenses, that you spend money on eligible expenses, then that loan will be forgiven. And that portion that you spend of the loan that you spend on eligible expenses will be forgiven, and given that the covered period became 24 weeks. There is no way that in 95, 98% of all the cases that all of the eligible expenses don't cover the whole loan. The whole loan should be forgiven. So the covered period, that is the period where you count the eligible expenses. And it is between 8 and 24 weeks, you pick. And they say, well, why wouldn't we just take the 24 weeks? Well, it depends. Some people are better off taking employee retention credits and cut off the covered period earlier so you can devote some portion of it to attention to employee retention credits. For last year, it was much harder to get to. This year, it's easier to get to. Last year, you had to have a 50% reduction in the quarter. And that's hard for a lot of people to get to. So most 90% of people are going for just PPP forgiveness. The covered period starts the day of funding. There are other things that they ask for, number of employees. And that's a simple question. It's not trick or anything. And I know people who have started kind of making complicated. When they're asking in the forgiveness, especially the under 150 form, 150 forgiveness for 150-day loan, that they're asking number of employees at the time of the loan application, the time of forgiveness application, and that's what they ask, just the number of employees, nothing else. If you had 15 people on the payroll, you have 15 people on the payroll. There's another question that is, did you reduce pay by more than 25% for anybody? That doesn't pertain to the total compensation for a person. That applies to the pay rate. The rate of pay, like the hourly rate. If you paid somebody $20 an hour and you reduced the pay by $1, it went to $19. That's a 5% reduction. But in total for the covered period, that person only got 50% as much in pay. That doesn't matter. It's the rate of pay they're asking for. Did you reduce the pay by more than 20 rate of pay? So in that case of the 20%, you would have to, with $20, you would have to reduce the rate by more than $5 an hour. And almost nobody has done that, either that laid off people, those kind of things. Very few that I've seen have actually reduced the rate of pay. Now, applications, there are 3 of them, and all of this is done on Bank Portal. There's no actual paper or PDF applications that I've seen being submitted. It's all on a Bank Portal. If you got a loan of 150K or less, then it's really easy. There's a couple of things they ask you. The loan amount, those kind of course, you get into your account with the bank or the lender, and you go through it, and they ask you the questions of you verifying that you're still in business, those kind of things. It's really easy, and it's done in 5 minutes or less. If you're over 150,000 of PPP loan, either 1 or 2, you qualify for the easy form. That's also pretty easy. It is, you have to qualify 1 of 3 things, and a long time ago we went through that. And if somebody needs help with that, if they're in that situation, give me an email and we try to go through it. That's also pretty easy. If you have a big loan and you don't qualify for the easy form, then you're into the big calculations, and you're into the full-time equivalents, etc. I would say then you need to have your CPA involved. And even if you have a $400,000 loan and you want to see if you qualify for easy form, get to your CPA. The American Association of CPAs have done an excellent work of getting the pro formas, the format to them, so you can just plug the numbers in and you go. You're going to need payroll reports, and if you're under 150, nobody's asking you to actually upload or anything, but they're asking you that you should have them handy if somebody asks. Chances are that nobody's going to ask for a smaller loan, but that's what they're asking. So, and they're also easy to get. Get with your payroll company, say that you need a PPP forgiveness report. They're going to ask you what your covered period is and those kind of things, and they should be able to send it to you pretty quickly. My experience has been that they're pushing a button and you get the report. Hold on. So a little bit more about the forgiveness. We talked about the covered period, 8 to 24 weeks. That's the period where you are counting your eligible expenses to get the loan forgiven. Basically, everybody makes it. When that went to 24 weeks last year, that guaranteed that for almost everybody that the whole loan would be forgiven. Now, some restaurant owners and hotel owners that closed down for a while, those kind of things, it's harder. You have to work harder at it, but for most people, not the case, so that almost everybody makes it. I have actually not run across anybody yet who's not making it. And again, the forgiveness, you're talking about the basis payroll costs we went through before, payroll costs with the gross payroll, local state payroll taxes, etc., have to be at least 60% of the total forgiven amount. So if you got 100,000, 60,000 of that forgivable amount has to be payroll costs. Then you can have 40,000 of other things. A lot of people for the 24-week covered period just did the payroll cost because that was quite a bit more than the loan and didn't want to hassle with uploading, if it was more than 150, uploading rent documents and all that kind of stuff. So they just did the payroll. For sole proprietors, again, the Schedule C that was used for the loan is the same document that is used for forgiveness, with the exception that if you, when you applied for your PPP loan last year, hadn't done your taxes yet, and you did a pro forma Schedule C at the time, now you have to submit the right one. And in some cases, there was a slight difference in the forgiven amount compared to the loan, but that's what it is. So basically for sole proprietors, because it's done on the same Schedule C, is automatically forgiven. The loan you got is considered from Schedule C to be a replacement owner compensation. So that's your payroll, so that is what's forgiven. Deadline for forgiveness application. That is something that is always confusion about, but it is 10 months after the end of the covered period. So you get the funding, you have up to 24 weeks to have a covered period, and then it's 10 months after that. You really have longer, but 10 months after the 24 weeks, that is when the SBA will start, and actually the bank will start asking for payments. And then you can just see the scenario that you get a bill and you say, this is going to be forgiven, I don't need to pay that. Well, if you haven't applied for forgiveness, it hasn't been approved, and you have to pay it because you don't want to be in default. So get it in 10 months after the covered period is a long time. You got a long time to do this, so get it done. There's no reason not to. And what I say now, don't blow it. And there are 3 forms, one for the under 150, 1-page form, really easy on the lender portal. Then you have the easy form, and then you have the brutal long form and all that. And then sole proprietor, basically 100% of the loan amount is automatically forgiven as long as you actually apply. And also reminder that don't worry about the tax issue on the PPP. There is no tax issue. There is no federal tax issue. There is no tax issue in New Jersey. New Jersey decided to follow the Fed and not tax. Some states have not done it yet, like California has not made a decision to do that yet. So as of now, California borrowers are subject to state income tax for the forgiven amount. Not in New Jersey, there is no tax issues, federal or New Jersey state tax. And also there was a basis issue at one time. They did take care of that. Reminder, EIDL grant, you don't have to, it will not be, your forgiveness amount will not be reduced by the EIDL grant. That was the case at one point in time. It is not so anymore. And we talked about necessity test. The big thing here is that don't do stupid. We talked about this a couple of times. If you got a $500,000 PPP loan, don't take that loan, turn around and go and buy a boat. That is what gets people's attention. And because they're going to say, you don't need it, you took money and you shouldn't have done this, and then you are risking getting an audit. If your loan was more than 2 million and up, I think it is, yes, 2 million, then you will be audited. SBA will be audited what you did, will audit you to see what you did with the money. Otherwise, the less you have, the less risk. If you're down in the 150, 200, 300 and lower than that, I don't see that anything gonna happen unless you have a bookkeeper that gets pissed off at you and turn you in and say that you used the money inappropriately. Best thing to do there, not use it inappropriately, wait until the forgiveness is done and all those kind of things. That's it. I am going to stop share and go back.
All right, so we can maybe we can go to, we have one question. It says, can individuals place their own criteria on PPP applications, individual banks? That is, such as different deadlines and requirements for the business checking account.
Yes, they actually can. They cannot make them less stringent than SBA. They can make them more stringent than SBA, and they can make other requirements, and banks have done that. They can make a requirement that you have a checking account and that you're a commercial customer with them, et cetera, et cetera. What we have seen is that most banks have their own little twist on little things and how they do things and how they ask the questions and what they ask for. And sometimes they ask for a little bit more than what SBA asks for. And you have no choice. You can't say, well, the SBA doesn't ask for this and they don't necessarily, so I'm not going to give you. Well, you know what? The bank makes the decision because it goes to bank approval. After bank approval, SBA approves. So yes.
Okay, that's the only question we have, I would say. Does anybody else have any questions that they may want to pose right now to Chris? If not, Chris, I would ask you, so this is our last scheduled PPP webinar, just whilst we give people a chance to pose their questions. Did we want to, are we going to go ad hoc from now on or extend?
I would say let's go ad hoc from now on.
Okay.
If there's small things that come out, we'll just send it out as an email. to people
Okay.
registered to these. If there are major things that are a little complicated and that people really should know, as such as if there is a third bite at the apple, or that SBA decides that they're going to take the sole proprietor move from net income to revenues and actually make that retroactive, then maybe we have another go around.
Okay.
So we can go through, but as of now, let's make it ad hoc in case we need it.
Okay, so just and then whilst we were talking about that, a couple of questions came in. So answering Margaret, you can rewatch this on our YouTube channel, Monmouth Score. So every webinar we have is placed on there. Give it a day or so, and you'll see it in there. Is there any difference between banks and non-banks when applying for the PPP loan?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there any difference between banks and non-banks when applying for the PPP loan?
No, there really is not, from when you look at it from a loan amount perspective, the requirements that are there. From the perspective of ease of usage, generally speaking, what I've seen is that the non-bank lenders are more apt at consumer lending and fast lending and processing online. It's more user friendly, I would say, the non-bank lenders. From a perspective of getting the loan amounts and those kinds of things, there is nothing different now.
Okay. Then we have a question, how does the PPP apply to startups?
If you were a startup that started on or before 2015, then there are provisions that you can move all move it all up and use for applying for the loan. You can use any 12-month period or shorter up until you apply, but you have to have been in business on or before 2015. There's no such thing as getting a loan for future payroll. It has to be payroll has been occurred up until you do the application.
Okay, great. And then, so for a sole proprietor applying for PPP 1, the applicant applies for a loan amount equal to 20.83% of the Schedule C line 7. And this amount will be fully forgiven, but only upon application of forgiveness. Is that correct?
That is right. You have to apply to forgiveness. And then that forgiveness application goes to the bank, they approve it, then it goes to SBA, who then approve it, and then it's forgiven. And you will get a notice that it's been forgiven.
Okay, and then the next question was referring to the bank versus non-bank. So if I got the first PPP loan from a bank, but the second one they declined it or the time had expired. So can I go to any other bank or non-bank if it's been declined or expired from the previous bank?
Yes, you can actually apply in as many places as your heart desires. You just can't accept more than one of each one. You can accept one PPP 1, you can accept one PPP 2, and there were a lot of people who, especially in 1, applied in many places because there were difficulties getting through. And there are many people in 2 who went to a different lender in 2 because the first one either didn't want to do it or didn't know if they wanted to do it, etc. So yes, you can apply to as many as you want to.
Okay. Do we have any other questions out there? If not, Chris, I mean, I think that's it for the questions. I don't know if there's any other.
And as the old man as I am, then I'm going to need to go to the bathroom.
So then it's perfect timing to end it. So keep an eye out on your emails, those of you who are with us. And as and when changes come out, either we will email you those any changes, or if they're significant enough, we'll schedule some more, another series of webinars or another webinar. So just keep an eye on your emails. And check out monmouth.score.org for any other webinars that we have. We have them scheduled out now through, I think, June. So just have a look in there, and if there's anything that may be helpful for you in your business, feel free to register and jump on. Chris, any other comments?
No, I think I am good, and thanks for attending, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you on the next webinar.
One more question, apparently.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you.
you're very
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Thanks. Goodbye.
All right. Bye, everyone.